Last week, Paul Heyman saved the day by getting CM Punk ready to side with Roman and the original Bloodline for a single night. Punk was the much-needed assistance Roman needed, but the problem is that Punk feels the same way about Roman, and Roman is obviously not the biggest fan of Punk. Roman and Punk have a long history that began in 2012, the year The Shield joined the main cast. During the first several months of their main roster run, CM Punk not only developed the Shield's concept and presented it to the WWE, but the Shield was also working for him on screen. Although Punk was never explicitly identified as the leader of the Shield, it was strongly suggested at the time that both Punk and Paul Heyman had significant influence over the group's decisions. Although it's unclear exactly what Heyman and Punk provided the crew in exchange for their services, it was obvious that they essentially served as hitmen for Punk and were always available to him when he needed assistance with a title defense or needed someone to look after. The onslaught on The Rock was one of the most iconic things that Punk and Heyman made the Shield do. The Shield viciously attacked The Rock during a week on Raw in the midst of Punk and The Rock's war, to the point where by the end of the onslaught, he was coughing up blood. And perhaps that's where Roman's animosity with CM Punk originates, because perhaps this is the root of it all, because Roman and the Shield were not only Punk's yes men, but Punk also ordered a hit on Roman's own family member, The Rock, and Roman was compelled to comply. During the first few months of his main roster tenure, Roman was working under Punk and producing all of those successes for him. Clearly, something went wrong to ruin their relationship. Perhaps Heyman and Punk promised Roman and the Shield something they didn't follow through on. Roman obviously made amends with Paul Heyman for whatever was going on at the time, but he hasn't made amends with Punk, and as a result, tensions remain high over 10 years later. However, this in-person interaction between Roman and Punk was shot in a cinematic manner backstage. It had dramatic music, was filmed almost like a short film, and appeared to be a lot like the Roman and Cody scene from just before Bad Blood. You must surely enjoy it because, even though it's not a physical appearance in front of the SmackDown audience, it's still a segment that keeps both stars on the show moving the plot along. However, in the episode, Roman and Punk make it apparent that they detest and can't stand one another. He only agreed to do this because he is doing it for his close friend Paul Heyman, which Punk validates what many fans were already thinking. Punk stated that he is in this bout to exact retribution on Heyman's behalf, not to assist Roman in regaining his position of authority, because he didn't like what Solo did to Heyman during the beatdown on SmackDown. Heyman intervened to help Punk and Roman realize the seriousness of the situation when their conversation was still not going well. Heyman stated that if they are not unified at Survivor Series, the original Bloodline will win out, and Punk will have a significant numerical advantage as the whole new Bloodline pursues him. Punk and Roman finally consented after Heyman lobbied and pleaded with them to commit to this one-night event, but not before Punk left the whole thing on a huge cliffhanger. Roman accepted the terms of their agreement, but he tries to question Heyman about what Punk's favor might be. Punk stated that he would do the match and be on the same page as Roman, but that since this is him doing a favor for Paul Heyman, Heyman will now owe Punk a significant one-time favor in return. Heyman hinted that he is already aware of the favor, but they will discuss it further once War Games is resolved. The next significant event that looms over this plot is that Heyman will soon need to do a significant favor for Punk. What may that favor be, given Heyman and Punk's exchange from earlier this year, while Roman was still on hiatus? Some fans believe they may know something about the favor. Heyman was beginning to feel quite uneasy about being a part of Solo's rendition of the Bloodline at the time. Heyman came out to beg Punk for a significant favor during this segment, which was for Punk to take him away from the Bloodline for his rare appearance on SmackDown at the moment. Although Punk was unable to do Heyman the favor that evening, fans are speculating as to whether it might end up being the favor that Punk requests. Perhaps Punk would end up asking Paul Heyman to leave the Bloodline entirely and accompany him to serve as his manager, just like in the good old days on Raw. And since he has a strong affection for Paul Heyman, Punk is likely to expend his one significant favor in a way that will save Heyman from the turmoil in the Bloodline realm. Additionally, Heyman may be feeling conflicted because earlier this year, when things were very different and Roman Reigns was nowhere to be found, he did invite Punk to accompany him. Thus, it's possible that Heyman feels conflicted since he wants to go and be with Punk once more but also wants to be with Roman. Perhaps that's where this plot will go. Punk did have a lengthy line at the end of the backstage portion, where he referred to Paul Heyman as our Wiseman. There is an obvious indication that Punk believes Heyman belongs to both of them and does not view him as Roman's own Wiseman. However, it is possible that he is attempting to have Heyman become his own exclusive Wiseman by the end of this current plan. And that does appear to be a rather sensible goal for Punk's character to have right now. Punk may want to exact revenge on Paul Heyman, but it's also possible that he wants to remove him from all facets of the bloodline and remove him from the situation altogether because he believes that everything about it is getting too risky and dangerous for him to be involved in. The tricky aspect will be determining whether Roman would let Heyman simply leave with Punk or whether Roman will battle to keep Heyman around if that is the plan and Heyman is aware of it. Perhaps Heyman is alluding to that when he states that they will talk about everything following Survivor Series. Heyman and Punk agreed that Punk would assist them at War Games as long as Heyman finished and left the bloodline immediately thereafter. Though it's absurd to consider those concepts, they do feel quite plausible. Maybe they're aiming for a variation of it. Perhaps after the Survivor Series, the new bloodline goes quiet for a little, allowing Punk and Roman to continue their rivalry over Paul Heyman. Additionally, fresh information on the purported plans for Roman and the original bloodline has surfaced. According to these sources, the original bloodline reunion is not a one-night event and the group will continue to participate in each other's stories for at least the duration of the winter. And that makes sense because the original bloodline members had a lot of animosity toward one another. Now that everyone is back on the same page, it will be good to see the group even more. However, what do you think of the stories from today? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe with all alerts enabled, and hit like if you liked it. I appreciate you watching, folks. Last week, Paul Heyman saved the day by getting CM Punk ready to side with Roman and the original bloodline for a single night. Punk was the much-needed assistance Roman needed, but the problem is that Punk feels the same way about Roman and Roman is obviously not the biggest fan of Punk. Roman and Punk have a long history that began in 2012, the year The Shield joined the main cast. During the first several months of their main roster run, CM Punk not only developed the Shield's concept and presented it to the WWE, but the Shield was also working for him on screen. Although Punk was never explicitly identified as the leader of the Shield, it was strongly suggested at the time that both Punk and Paul Heyman had significant influence over the group's decisions. Although it's unclear exactly what Heyman and Punk provided the crew in exchange for